It goes back to the day before the loop began. At night, Encred places his hand on his chest and thinks he can feel Rem stimulating his heart, but he can't do it alone. He remembers Rem saying, "If it doesn't work, there's no helping it." Encred knows he must learn when to accept his limits and give up. But to him, giving up means settling for the state he's in, and that's the same as dying. Even in the past, when learning skills unlike the genius squad members, Encred had to find his own way. Instead of fearing death, he learned to raise his focus through fighting a rival, like single-point focus. Closing his eyes, Encred wonders, what does the heart of brute strength require? Where does it begin? The scene shifts to the present. Encred's heart starts to bleed due to Rem's forceful stimulation. Ragna pulls Rem forcefully and calls him a crazy barbarian. Jackson and Auden desperately try to wake Encred, shouting his name and telling him to get a hold of himself. As Encred closes his eyes and takes his last breath, the boatman appears and mockingly asks if this pathetic plan is the best he could think of. Just keep blowing his heart apart until he dies. Encred replies, "The heart of brute strength is the brute force that appears in a crisis, used even in ordinary times. Meaning, if there's a moment of crisis, then activating the heart of brute strength will be easier." The boatman tells Encred he is not an ordinary madman. It asks if he ever thinks about the agony of dying over and over again. Encred says he can endure it, as long as he can take even one step further. Another loop begins. Rem tells Encred, "Today's a bust." Though disappointed, he advises Encred not to cling to what doesn't work, to wash his feet and sleep. Encred thinks this is the 27th loop, and he still can't move his heart on his own. Frustration gnaws at him, a sharp, familiar companion. Encred stops Rem and insists that if Rem stimulates his heart harder, it should work. Rem angrily asks if he wants him to kill him. With a serious face, Encred affirms. Rem grits his teeth and replies, even if he is insane, he should at least be insane with some grace. Plus, he doesn't like killing his superiors. Hearing that, Encred gets confused. Mockingly, Encred calls Rem a noble killer. He hadn't expected Rem to care. While leaving, Rem points at Encred and says if he keeps flapping his mouth about his secrets, he will get it ripped open. As he watches Rem leave, Encred wonders why Rem's reaction is different from all the previous loops. At night, Encred thinks, even if it's a wall he built himself, if he can't cross it. The day repeats again. Even with time left over, he can just train, so it's not a problem. But he wonders again, why Rem didn't listen to him this time around. Encred decides he will keep repeating the loop until he finds out. On the 30th loop, Encred tells Rem to stimulate his heart harder. Rem doesn't listen. At the 40th loop, Encred tells him again. Still no response. At the 50th loop, Encred insists. Nothing changes. On the 60th loop, with a serious look, Encred tells Rem to trust him, telling him that it's an order. Rem is taken aback by Encred's words, but starts stimulating his heart harder. Encred realizes that after about 60 repetitions, Rem only listens when it's a command. The others too. Encred reflects that all of them were rejects, gathered into this squad because they wouldn't obey orders. Encred thought they wouldn't listen to him either, so he hadn't bothered trying to control them. But at some point, they began obeying his commands faithfully. Encred is curious about the reason, but for now, he will focus on mastering the heart of brute strength. He must make the heart pound hard, circulate blood through the body, and feel the muscles surge with strength beyond their limits, beyond what seems humanly possible. In every loop, Encred tells Rem to stimulate his heart harder again and again. But his heart bursts each time, and he dies coughing blood. The more the loop repeats, the more determined and scary Encred became, to the point where even Rem was starting to feel the pressure and getting frustrated. Then, at some point, Encred notices something different. His heart is stable. It didn't burst. Rem is surprised. In just one day, Encred has mastered the sensation of moving his heart. Encred thinks, after repeating the loop over and over again, he finally succeeded in bursting his own heart by himself. After hundreds of loops have passed, Encred is ready to test his newfound strength. Encred stands next to a stone cliff holding his sword, ready to charge, while everyone waits patiently to see Encred's demonstration. Rem gets shocked at what he sees. Encred charges toward the cliff, his eyes sharp and focused. His heart starts to beat faster and activates the heart of brute strength. He attacks the stone cliff with all his strength, shattering it into pieces with just one strike. The debris explode outward as Encred maintains his stance. He finally crossed the wall he built himself. The squad watches in awe, their faces reflecting fear, respect, and admiration. With a serious tone, Rem speaks up and tells Encred he wants to ask him two things. First, is he from the West by any chance? Second, was he actually a genius? With an indifferent tone, Encred replies, he is neither. The scene changes to nighttime. As Encred lays with steam rising from his body, he says he managed to learn the heart of brute strength safely, but he didn't expect this kind of backlash. He asks Rem if this is normal since he can't even move. Rem scoffs, saying his body wasn't ready yet. Odin, sitting next to him, says it was Encred's first time forcing his muscles to use such power. It's natural that his muscles are clumped and aching. Grunting, Encred tries to move, thinking that even if this is his first time, this level of soreness is brutal. He reflects that the heart of brute strength is a tempting skill that lets a human body wield extraordinary power, but if used recklessly, it overloads the body. He can feel that all too clearly now. He continues, saying, knights don't even need such tricks. They're already beyond human limits. Their shell is human, but they wield the strength of giants, display a frog's physical prowess, and have the sharp senses of elves. That is what a knight is. Still groaning from the pain, he says he's still far from reaching that realm. Odin, seeing him in pain, says that at the very least he must rest and do nothing for a day. Then, casting a shadow over Encred, he says he can help with his recovery. Towering over him with a twisted but innocent smile, he says he calls it blood, sweat, and tears. With a concerned face, Encred asks what he's talking about. Odin grabs one of Encred's legs and starts massaging his calves. Instantly, Encred is hit with a wave of pain so intense he nearly levitates off the bed. He clutches a pillow like it's his last lifeline, eyes wide, trying not to scream. Sweat pours down his face as he feels like he's on the brink of death. The pain he is going through feels like one of the boatman's walls. As Odin continues working on the leg, he calmly instructs Encred to pay attention to the pressure points. This is a technique meant to loosen cramped muscles. The formal name for it is the Balaf-style pressure technique. Encred, now gripping his own hair in agony, thinks to himself that learning this method might actually be useful. Still clenching the pillow like it owes him money, Encred braces himself and resolves to endure. Even if he sees a river before him, he will hold on. Irritated by the noise, Rem yells, saying this hunk is trying to kill him. Meanwhile, Encred is locked in a full-body battle. Odin, calm and smiling like a saint of suffering, keeps massaging with merciless precision. The scene shifts to the next morning. Encred sits on the edge of his bed. Thanks to Odin, he nearly met the boatman, but the soreness has eased a lot. Odin told him not to do anything during recovery, but it feels like such a waste of time. Lifting his sword, he thinks at least he could maintain his weapon. Suddenly, Odin appears behind him, whispering the word nothing. He snatches the sword from Encred's hands and reminds him he wasn't supposed to move his body at all. Encred, caught off guard, insists he only meant to clean his sword. Before he can explain further, Christ jumps in, offering to take the weapon off his hands and handle the maintenance for him. Suspicious of this generous offer, Encred stops him, clutching the sword protectively. There's no way Christ would do anything for free. Christ switches to his business face, commending Encred for his sharp observation and casually tossing out a price of 20 coppers. Encred counters with 10. Without missing a beat, Christ drops it to 18. Encred squints at him, wondering if it's an insult. Reluctantly, Christ says he can do 17 but refuses to go any lower. Encred, surprised by the stubborn pricing, asks why it's so expensive. Christ explains that it's a high-end weapon. Extra care comes at a premium. He extends his hand and asks for Encred's second sword. As Christ walks out of the tent with Encred's 2 swords, Encred thinks to himself that he did say he would use dual swords and wonders why everyone is just accepting it so easily. He thought at least one of his team members would stop him. He then explains that even renowned experts rarely use the dual sword style. Despite its flair, the technique is considered impractical due to its difficulty and risks. Without sufficient strength, it's hard to wield even a single blade one-handed, and compared to two-handed swings, the power behind dual sword attacks is noticeably reduced. He turns to his team and asks why no one's telling him not to use dual swords. Odin and Rem glance at him. Rem raises an eyebrow and says, "Just like that?" Odin follows up, asking why Encred thinks no one's stopping him. Jackson jumps in, saying it's because Encred is stubborn as hell. Encred points to himself, questioning if that's really true. Odin explains that the way Encred refuses to back down and keeps pushing forward is a clear sign of stubbornness. Encred responds that it's not baseless. There's reason behind it. Ragna joins the conversation and asks Encred why he insists on using dual swords. Encred answers simply, it's because he likes it. Something about wielding 2 blades just feels right to him. The scene shifts to a memory from Encred's past. A musician plays a song about a night by a campfire, surrounded by listeners, including a younger Encred. With eyes burning with passion, he sings out loud, finishing the lyrics with the words, "The night of armistice." Suddenly, a guy kicks him in the head from behind, saying singing won't make him as strong as a knight. Another man calls him pathetic. As Encred lays there beaten, the men walk off, one calling him a pitiful bastard. Encred slams the ground with force and declares that even if everyone mocks him and calls it pathetic, he lives for what he desires. And he lives for what he loves. The scene returns to the present. Encred, steady and resolute, declares he has no intention of giving up, neither on becoming a knight nor on wielding dual swords. The others listen in silence, no judgment in their eyes. They know he means every word. Rem watches him closely. Encred is different. Rem was born with everything and chose to walk away from it. Encred has only a single sword, yet he moves forward with unwavering resolve. A small smile creeps onto Rem's face. That's why he likes the captain. Ragna overhears and teases him, saying he's got a peculiar taste. Rem, clearly annoyed, flips him off and mutters not to worry. He still hates them all. Ragna grins and replies that the feeling's mutual. Jackson notes that it seems like they're all on the same page. Odin, ever serene, adds that the Lord teaches to embrace all things equally, but as his humble servant, even he has limits, and he dislikes them all just the same. Rem snaps, yelling that even if they've reached a conclusion, they sure talk a lot. Encred notes how well they all seem to get along, prompting Ragna to shoot back that that's an insult, actually. Before the banter can escalate, Jackson strolls over with a handful of stones in his palm. He asks Encred, if he's bored killing time, why not train instead? Encred reminds him he was told not to do anything. Jackson replies that it's exactly why this training is perfect. It only requires eye movement. It's called sense of evasion, the next step Jackson had planned for him. Encrid's eyes light up, a smile spreading across his face. Even on rest days, there's a way forward, and he's more than ready to take it. Meanwhile, Kreis is outside, carefully cleaning Encrid's sword and admiring his work, saying it looks like something new. He overhears a soldier talking nearby, mentioning how the main battle seems to be dragging on. Kreis perks up his ears, listening as the soldier continues. The soldier talks about Battalion Commander Marcus and about their battalion's supply route. Kreis listens closely, catching every word. Then the soldier mentions a new enemy unit taking position at their rear camp. Rumor has it they're the remnants, the ones who fought them before and ran. Kreis mutters that the war situation doesn't look so good. As he gathers the swords and stands up, he thinks they need to gather more intel. He thinks Aspen seems to be trying a new move, and we see one of the enemy leaders drafting something. The scene jumps to Jackson talking to Encrid about the sense of evasion. Jackson says evasion means to see with your eyes and dodge. As he holds up a rock, he continues saying that training the sense of evasion is about pushing your reaction speed to the extreme. But before that, he says, Encrid needs dynamic vision. As Encrid listens intently, Jackson tells him he will throw stones marked with letters, and Encrid must read them and respond. He hurls a rock past Encrid, but it flies by too quickly for Encrid to even register what it was. As Encrid looks at the fallen rock, confused, Jackson picks up another rock from his collection and says he will throw again, launching the next stone and asking what letter was written on it. Encrid, still unable to keep up, fails to answer. This exercise continues into the night. Jackson throws another rock and urges Encrid to focus and look closely. After the training session, Odin begins cracking Encrid's back as Encrid groans, struggling through the pain. After the torture sessions, Odin tells Encrid he has improved significantly. His body should now be fine to move. Encrid, drenched in sweat, asks if that's true. Suddenly, a rock whizzes past Encrid's face. It's Jackson. Holding another stone in his hand, he asks Encrid what letter was carved on the one he just threw. Encrid, slightly irritated, glares at Jackson and questions whether he waited for a moment of vulnerability on purpose. Jackson remains unfazed, reminding Encrid that mercy doesn't exist on the battlefield. The scene cuts to the outskirts of their base. Hidden in a bush, a suspicious figure crouches low, clutching a weapon. Their intent is clearly malicious. Back at training, another stone is launched at high speed. Encrid's eyes glow as he locks onto it, tracking the motion with intense focus. He follows the stone until it hits the ground, his gaze never wavering. A smile creeps onto his face. He begins to speak, saying he saw, but before he can finish, chaos erupts. Soldiers sprint across the camp, weapons drawn, shouting about an ambush. Jackson and Encrid turn toward the commotion as others yell that it's a surprise attack and call for everyone to gather. Jackson ignores the noise. He turns back to Encrid and asks again what the letter was. Encrid, stunned by Jackson's indifference, asks if he's seriously still focused on that. Then, with certainty, he says the letter carved on the stone was M.I. and asks if he got it right. Jackson closes his eyes and lets the remaining stones fall from his hand. After crafting 40 M.I. stones, he says Encrid has finally succeeded and praises him with a calm, well done. He adds that Encrid will now be able to carve different letters. Encrid, unsure, wonders if that was genuine praise or sarcasm. The shouting continues as soldiers yell about an ambush. Suddenly, someone charges toward the noise. It's Rem, axe in hand, face lit with excitement, demanding to know where the attackers are. Encrid watches him and asks what's wrong with Rem, wondering if he's finally gone completely mad. Jackson replies that it's frustration. With Encrid bedridden, Rem hasn't had a chance to duel using the might-heart technique or something. Even bullying the never-tried squad leader wasn't enough to satisfy him. We then see Andrew, beaten and lying on the ground, calling out for someone to come at him. His bodyguard kneels beside him with a worried expression, urging Andrew to pull himself together so they can move. Rem finally reaches the commotion with a wide grin, while others stand around, stunned by what they're witnessing. Encred wonders why they're just gathering instead of fighting. Rem, clearly frustrated, demands to know where the enemy is, the giant, his toy. Andrew, bruised and dazed, asks what's going on. A nearby soldier explains that the enemy only fired arrows and then ran. Fallen soldiers lay scattered across the ground, arrows lodged deep in the backs of their heads. The soldier continues, saying the border guards will catch the archer, so there's nothing left for them to do. Rem stares into the distance and says the border guards alone won't be able to catch the archer. Encred looks at him, puzzled. Rem points ahead and tells him to examine the arrow. The shaft is longer and the feathers stretch farther back than usual. It's from a special bow designed for extreme range. He's seen it before, the work of someone called Hawk's Claw. Encred crosses his arms and asks when hawks ever had claws. Rem pauses, then wonders if it was Hawk's Fang instead. Encred can't recall clearly, but doesn't think that's right either. Rem sighs and says, Encred's memory is terrible. Encred reflects that for Rem, it's only been months, but for him, trapped in the loop, it's been years. Rem asks if Encred remembers the time he got beaten by the frog and ended up in the infirmary. Back then, during that chaotic battle, the archer responsible for these long-range attacks was rampaging across the field. Hearing that, something clicks in Encred's head, and he starts to remember. He recalls a soldier named Bell, nearly killed by a long-range arrow. Encred had saved him at the last moment. The archer behind it all was known as Hawk's Claw. The scene jumps to the tent, where someone casually asks if there was a raid. It's Ragna. Encred, unimpressed, asks what he was doing all day to miss something like that. Then pauses. He already knows. Ragna slept so much his face is greasy. Ragna shifts the topic, saying what's more important is Encred's dual swords. He's been thinking about them. Encred needs to get his body more accustomed to wielding two blades. Encred asks if Ragna has some kind of method. Ragna says he'll explain it in a way that's easy to understand. With a serious expression, Ragna raises two fingers and says, from now on, Encred has two lovers. Rem, caught off guard, says if Encred's fiancé hears that, he's dead. Encred quickly refutes it, saying she's not his fiancé. Ragna continues his explanation, saying Encred needs to eat, sleep, fight, and do everything with two swords in his hands. Getting used to them first is what matters. We then see Esther staring at Encred with a perplexed look. She complains that she doesn't even have a proper place to sleep anymore. As she climbs on top of Encred, she mutters that he now trains until he's asleep and grumbles about how uncomfortable it is. Suddenly, someone yells ambush. Rem and Encred jolt out of bed. Encred gets up so fast that Esther is launched into the air. A soldier shouts that arrows were fired again and the enemy ran off, and they need to call the border guard. Rem clicks his tongue and flops back onto his bed, saying, what a letdown. Esther is on the floor between the beds, still in shock. As Encred closes his eyes and goes back to sleep, she gets up, eyes glowing with rage, and raises her paws. She starts smacking Encred relentlessly, demanding to sleep in peace, while Encred tries to block the hits, groaning that it hurts. Chryse watches quietly as Esther continues to smack Encred with her paws. His expression shifts to concern. With a worried look, he notes that this is the second raid. The endless repetition of training continues, and in between, those arrows keep hitting their camp. The arrows of the Hawks' talon. Encred says the letter carved on the stone is YA. More arrows fly in, striking down more soldiers. Rem misses the archer again, and mutters that he's a quick bastard. Encred reads another carving on a stone and says, it's man. Another raid passes, claiming even more lives. Encred continues his routine of sleeping with his swords, and Esther is clearly not happy about it. Jackson throws another stone and asks what the letter was. Encred says the letter carved on the stone is IN, and notes that if you piece together all the letters so far, it spells out crazy barbarian. Rem notices this and becomes enraged. He gets ready to attack Jackson, declaring he'll carve him up instead of that hawk bastard. Encred steps in, blocking his path, and turns to Jackson, asking if he realizes he's always the one who starts the fight first. Jackson simply shrugs and walks away. The scene shifts to Kreis, quietly listening in on a conversation between two soldiers. They complain about how slippery the archer is. Not even a hair out of place, no trace left behind. Tracking him down feels impossible. Kreis begins to worry. There are multiple raids each day, yet no progress in catching the culprit. The damage seems small now, but if this continues, it will escalate into something far worse. As he stares at a lifeless body on the ground, frustration builds. He wonders what the high command is doing, and why they're failing to address the situation properly. Clicking his tongue, he mutters that he never wanted to step up and risk himself for nothing. But at this point, he doesn't have much of a choice. He walks over to Encred, addressing him as squad leader. Pointing to himself, he says he has an idea and asks if Encred wants to suggest a plan to high command. The scene changes to a tent, where someone is yelling about how the Aspen punks keep poking at them and how they should just march in and wipe them out. Inside, the higher-ups are locked in a heated argument. One officer questions whether they're really going to rush in without considering the possibility of a trap. Another snaps back, asking if they're supposed to just sit on their hands and do nothing. Meanwhile, the battalion commander sits quietly, lost in thought. He listens to the shouting and thinks there aren't many useful suggestions here. He clicks his tongue and admits he doesn't have any great move either. He's good at using force on the battlefield, but he's not the type for dirty backstage schemes. Just then, the 4th Company commander walks in, apologizing for being late. The battalion commander asks what took her so long. She explains that the mad squad leader, Encred, submitted a tactical proposal and requested temporary operational control. The battalion commander raises an eyebrow, wondering if the squad leader actually thinks strategically. The platoon commander says no. The detailed plan was put together by one of Encred's squad members, a soldier named Kreis. Someone at the table asks what the plan is, and the platoon commander begins to explain it. After hearing the whole plan, the battalion commander decides it's usable. He stands up and announces in a commanding tone that they will adopt the plan and the troops must prepare to march. And the mad squad will go on a falcon hunt mission. He thinks it's finally a plan he likes. We then see Encred's squad on the move. Rem, a bit disappointed, asks why they aren't chasing the hawk and are instead heading to the enemy's rear camp. Kreis answers, saying it's not that they're going to find Hawk's Talon, they're going to make Hawk's Talon come to them. Encred jumps in, saying the mad squad will act as a guerrilla unit temporarily. If they hit the enemy's rear camp and withdraw repeatedly, the enemy will deploy similar guerrilla teams to guard the rear. And then, Rem finishes the sentence, saying the Hawk bastard will come to them. Kreis agrees, but adds, that's only if things go well. Even if the hawk isn't lured in, they'll still be able to strike the enemy. Rem says the hunting method is annoyingly slow. Kreis turns toward him and says even simple-minded Rem might not get it, but this is the best option. Rem stares at Kreis with a twisted grin, his eyes gleaming with menace, asking if he is talking about him. Kreis freezes, realizing the comment may have crossed a line. As Rem's death stare intensifies, Kreis, pale and trembling, tries not to piss himself. Encred steps in quickly, cutting the tension and calling Rem off. Rem turns away, muttering that he'll let it slide, but Kreis should learn to keep his mouth shut. Kreis, still shaken, tries to salvage a shred of dignity by convincing himself that Rem backed down. Encred, looking ahead, asks how far they are from the destination and calls out to Pin. Pin, looking out into the distance, says their destination is coming into view. Rem reflects that the core of this plan is hit-and-run mobility. For that, a skilled ranger who finds safe routes is essential. When he requested reinforcements from high command, Pin was assigned to join the Mad Squad as their new squad leader. Curious, Rem asks why her assignment was changed to the Mad Squad specifically. Wouldn't a temporary support role have been enough? Pin turns and says it's because of complicated adult reasons. Rem gives her a skeptical look. She explains that her position became awkward after being sent out to support. Encred, feeling a pang of guilt, says he owes her one. Pin says she will repay him later. She then blows him a kiss and, while blushing, says with something good. Encred asks if she is still targeting him. Rem pats Encred on the back and says he even got a fiancé, he should keep some decency. Encred immediately snaps back, insisting she's not his fiancé. Eventually, they reach the enemy camp and begin observing from a cliff. Pin signals everyone to lower their posture. She's spotted the enemy position. Kreis warns that if things go south, they'll need to fall back into a retreat formation. He can't fight the entire battle himself, so they should send only a few forward and keep his escort ready. Before he can finish, Rem suddenly leaps off the cliff, eyes blazing, both axes drawn. Bloodlust radiates from him as he shouts that fresh blood is calling. Pin is caught completely off guard. As Rem slides down the cliff, yelling that he'll kill anyone who cuts in line, Encred watches and thinks no one has ever dared to covet Rem. Ragna rises, sword in hand, and tells Encred he wants to see how stable his stance is. Encred glances at him, wondering if this is some kind of test. Ragna and Encred follow Rem down the cliff, and Encred thinks to himself, even here, the training never stops. Someone calls out to the two enemy soldiers guarding the entrance. Ragna walks up to them with a jolly face, waving his hand and telling them to come over. One soldier, confused, asks the other if he knows the guy, while the other wonders if he's his friend. As they continue to puzzle over who he is, Rem suddenly throws his axe and hits one of the enemy soldiers square on the head. The other soldier, terrified, screams that there's an enemy. As Ragna and Encred finally make it to the bottom, Encred notices something ahead. Rem pulls his leg back and launches himself forward with insane speed. He charges the enemy with his other axe, his face twisted in bloodlust, catching the soldier completely off guard. Encred, surprised, wonders what that move was. He grins, thinking it's the fastest charge they've seen so far. He starts to wonder if Rem still has more hidden techniques. As Rem stands over the defeated enemies, Encred says he wants to learn it. Hearing the commotion, other enemy soldiers begin to emerge, shouting that it's the Kingdom of Norelia troops and to get them. Encred, seeing the numbers grow, orders everyone to fall back for now. They need to retreat before the enemies overwhelm them. Behind him, Ragna complains that he hasn't even drawn his sword yet. As they're retreating, Ragna turns to Rem and tells him to get a feel for the situation, since it wasn't his turn. Rem, irritated, asks what he just said. Does he want him to split his throat? Encred steps in and tells them to stop it. The operation is still underway, and there will be plenty of chances to fight. The scene shifts to evening. Encred and the squad move out to attack again. An enemy soldier throws a dagger toward them, shouting that it's them. They're here again. As he slides down the cliff, Encred sees the dagger coming at him. He thinks about the sense of evasion. The moment he sees it with his eyes, he needs to dodge. Encred moves his head slightly and avoids the dagger, landing safely on the ground. Jackson, watching closely, says the time from seeing to reacting took 0.4 seconds. As he slits an enemy soldier, he tells Encred he needs to cut his reaction time down to at least 0.1 seconds to truly master the sense of evasion. He needs to push himself harder. Encred drives his sword through an enemy's throat and wonders if Jackson actually counted that just now. Odin, smashing someone's head to the ground, says, "Training is fine, but they need to focus on the operation too." While running, he warns that the enemy is coming, and Enkrid immediately orders everyone to fall back. The enemy continues to chase them through the night. One enemy soldier, out of breath from the relentless pursuit, wonders why these guys are so fast. We see Andrew and his bodyguard sprinting through the trees. Chryse, being piggybacked by Odin, glances back and thinks honestly, he was worried these madmen could even pull off the plan. Now he sees there was no need to worry. Enkrid tells everyone to run deeper into the forest. Rem, trailing behind, casually asks why they can't just kill them all. Enkrid says no and tells him to keep running. Enkrid spots Ragna veering off in another direction and stops him, telling him to just follow the back of the person in front of him. Ragna insists the other way looks like a shortcut, but Enkrid shuts it down and tells him to stay with the group. Looking back at Enkrid, Chryse says he didn't expect him to lead so steadily. He wonders if this really is the Mad Squad. The squad finally reaches a safe spot. Enkrid announces that the pursuit has stopped and they'll camp here for the night. Sitting beside a tree, Enkrid reflects on his training loop, where he was learning the heart of superhuman strength. Once he realized the squad at least obeys his orders, it became easier to control them. That charge he saw from Rem earlier was impressive. He thinks Rem listens well these days and wonders if maybe he'll even teach that technique if ordered. He calls out to Rem and starts to ask about the charge he showed earlier. But before he can finish, Rem shoots him a scolding glare and says, if he's seriously asking that, he'd better think again. Looking at him, Enkrid wonders why, as he never refused to learn something before. Rem closes his eyes and thinks Enkrid's attitude toward learning is good, but he's forgotten something, the step of thinking for himself. He's skipped that stage. Getting too used to just following orders leads to mistakes like this. Growth spoon-fed by others is hollow. He needs to go back to basics. Rem smiles and continues, thinking Enkrid needs to struggle and think for himself. That's when it becomes worth teaching him. We then see Enkrid meditating, silent and focused. We see someone running. It's Andrew, out of breath from the relentless pace. Sweating, he says they've been sprinting non-stop from the start until now. Moving through the mountains at this speed, he feels like he could pass out at any moment. Looking ahead, he says he figured the madmen would be fine, of course, but he didn't expect Chryse to hold up that well either. And even the captain, too. Looking at Enkrid, he thinks back to when they first met. Enkrid wasn't that strong then, and he wonders how on earth he's grown this much. He stops, trying to catch his breath. As he huffs and coughs, he thinks that he too wants to do more. With renewed determination, he continues running. Seeing this, his bodyguard is surprised. He recalls the first time he met Andrew as the son of a friend. When the Gardner family fell and his friend died before him, he took care of Andrew in his place. Looking at the running Andrew, he thinks the one who once seemed like a child has somehow become a man. Watching his back, he can feel something approaching, the rebuilding of the Gardner family. The scene shifts to Enkrid, speaking with Rem. Enkrid says he figured out the principle behind that charge Rem performed before. With a proud smile, he says the answer was the might heart. Rem had strengthened his leg muscles to generate explosive thrust. Rem responds that if Enkrid already knows, then he should stop asking and start doing. Now that he understands the principle, it's time to apply it himself. Enkrid agrees and says he'll try it on his own. Once they reach a cliff, Pin orders everyone to halt. Pointing ahead, she directs their attention to a stronghold built on flat ground between cliffs. If the rear is blocked, the escape route is sealed. She notes that the terrain is perfectly suited for an ambush. Enkrid, leaning forward, says it's a trap. Chryse, standing beside him, adds that setting up a trap so blatantly is actually meant to make them avoid it. He turns to the group and explains that the enemy wants to guide their path and strike when they're cornered. But the others don't seem interested in what he's saying. He continues, saying it means Hawk's talon will appear soon. Hearing this, Ragnar clicks his tongue, Odin gives a thumbs up, and Rem simply smiles. Chryse, a bit annoyed, wonders if they are even listening to him. Encred, crossing his arms, considers whether they should play along with the enemy's plan. Ragnar, from behind, says it's annoying, and they should just smash it. Encred admits he's tempted to do that too. Looking down at the enemy, he says, if the trap doesn't work, the hawk will show up faster. He turns to the group and says that this time the armed force is large, so they will all go together. Chryse wonders if he is going too. Encred says Chryse will fall back. Pin, Andrew, and Mac will guard him. Hearing this, the three acknowledge the order as Chryse breathes a sigh of relief. Encred leads the charge, sliding down the cliff and calling the others to follow. Without hesitation, they move in behind him. At the enemy camp, the Grey Dog commander walks slowly, lost in thought. He reflects that this is the final chance granted to the Grey Dog, supporting the Norelia guerrilla unit as they ravage the rear camp by making the Hawk's Talon hunt them. He explains that the Grey Dog is a renowned Aspen unit. Gritting his teeth with frustration, he says being reduced to merely supporting a single soldier is humiliating, but they have to pull it off if they ever want to rise again. The enemy soldiers spot the squad approaching and begin sounding the alarm. The commander looks back, momentarily taken aback, wondering why they came. Surely they must have noticed the trap. What kind of fools are they? Then he sees Encred leading the charge. Fury overtakes him, and gritting his teeth, he says Encred was part of that guerrilla unit. Encred looks at him, puzzled. He turns to Rem and asks if that's not the guy. Rem, unfazed, wonders why he's asking him. Encred says the face looks familiar. Rem shrugs, saying his memory is too poor to recall. The Grey Dog commander, his anger boiling over, calls Encred a cocky bastard. It doesn't matter if he remembers or not. He unsheathes his sword with burning rage and declares they'll kill them all here anyway. The commander charges toward Encred, shouting for him to become a stepping stone for the Grey Dog's future. Encred calmly draws his sword and blocks the incoming strike. The commander is stunned when he sees the weapon Encred is wielding. Encred, still holding the block, wonders if this is the Grey Dog that knows Meech, the one who blocked the banner in the fog of slaughter. The commander shoves Encred forcefully and says it doesn't matter, then lunges for another attack, shouting for him to die. But Encred easily deflects the strike and counters, pushing the commander back. Encred thinks back to their first encounter. The Grey Dog commander had been a formidable opponent, but in the end, he only managed to flee. Encred wonders how he'll fare now. The two charge at each other, and Encred sees this as the perfect chance to test the results of his training. Watching the intense duel, one of the enemy soldiers remarks that it looks like there's some grudge between them. As he approaches the rest of the squad with his comrades, he says they'll smash them. But the mad squad completely ignores them, focused solely on the duel unfolding before them. A Grey Dog soldier charges at them with a mace, yelling that these bastards are being disrespectful. An axe blocks the incoming strike, silencing the attacker and telling him to be quiet. Rem, without even looking, says they're focusing right now. The Grey Dog commander charges in again, and Encred locks onto the movement. He reacts instantly, slipping behind the commander and slashing his back with his sword. Seeing this, Jackson notes that the reaction time between recognizing the preparatory move and dodging is 0.1 seconds, an acceptable passing score. The commander, still reeling from the previous strike, spins around and swings his sword for another attack, cursing Encred with fury. Encred, reading the movement, swiftly draws his second sword and braces himself. With precise timing, he raises both blades and catches the incoming upper slash, locking it in place. Ragna observes and remarks that Encred is now drawing his blade and assuming a defensive stance simultaneously. He's starting to understand how to utilize dual swords. But the commander doesn't relent. Gritting his teeth, he pours more force into his strike, pushing Encred back. Odin watches calmly, thinking that Encred still lacks the strength to parry effectively with one hand. Next time, he'll add another rock to his training. Encred lands safely, slowing his momentum by driving his sword into the ground. As the Grey Dog commander charges in for another attack, he scoffs at the dual swords, mocking Encred as a rookie just showing off. Encred glares at him with cold, steady eyes, silently preparing for something. Rem notices the shift and grins, realizing Encred is about to activate the heart of superhuman strength. Encred's heart begins to pound, pumping blood throughout his body and unlocking a surge of power. With explosive force, he charges at the commander, closing the distance in an instant. The commander is caught off guard by Encred's sudden speed. Encred strikes with overwhelming power, and though the commander manages to block, the impact is so intense that his sword begins to crack under the pressure. As the commander struggles to hold back the blow, Encred readies his second sword and drives it into the commander's neck. Encred pulls out his sword just as the commander begins to collapse. The commander hits the ground hard, blood pouring from the deep wound in his neck. The enemy soldiers stand frozen in disbelief, unable to comprehend that their company commander was defeated by Encred. Rem bursts into proud laughter, saying he knew it would be perfect once the captain activated the heart of superhuman strength. Ragna nods, admitting it's not bad at all, while Odin calmly adds that even the Lord must be pleased with Encred's growth. Rem then turns to the terrified enemy soldiers, calling them iron lumps. With a menacing grin and eyes gleaming with excitement, he invites them to come closer, saying he's so hyped he feels like slicing something up. Behind him, the rest of the squad begins to ready themselves, weapons drawn, preparing to join the fight.